Here's what this 1971 Ariens SNO THRO looked like before. And here's what it looks like after. Hey guys and gals, welcome to Garage Gear. I'm JB, and this 1971 Ariens SNO THRO has been torn down, sandblasted, primed, painted, clear coated, and now is fully rebuilt. And this build wasn't easy. There were a ton of challenges along the way. It was easier to tear this thing down, but it took 4 times longer and nearly 2 full days to rebuild it. I had to take a day off from work, and it cost me a small fortune to do all this too. We got a lot to get into. Let's go. Once everything was fully repainted, I gave it a solid 2 weeks before I started to rebuild it. This allowed for ample drying time, and it also came down to timing with my schedule. The rebuild all started with the hardware. I ended up replacing about half of it with all brand new stainless steel hardware. I just couldn't justify spending all the time taking tons of tiny washers and trying to grind them back down to bring back all the shine. That would have been far too time consuming. For the larger parts, like the bigger bolts, the bushings, the springs, the brackets, I ended up taking a wire brush on a drill tube. That brought back the shine and cleaned them up nice. I did try dunking the parts in vinegar for 24 hours and then later in baking soda to help with the cleaning process, but this only helped to a small extent. The drill got them clean fast, and what I did is I ended up attaching an old vise to the end of my workbench so that way I could do all the grinding outside and leave the mess outside. All the parts came out cleaner. I ended up hitting them with WD-40 to shine them up further and prevent rusting. This whole process took about 2 hours to complete. And to help keep this video shining with the YouTube algorithm, would you mind hitting that like button? My 1971 Ariens SNO THRO thanks you. Next, I began rebuilding with the bucket. I ordered a brand new scraper bar, and what was super cool is they still make them for this model. It was a direct fit, and I purchased brand new hardware for it too. Bolted right on. I made a decision early on that as I performed this whole rebuild, I would also perform my rust proofing course on it at the exact same time. This is my backup snowblower, and I want it to truly last a lifetime. And I figured since I have everything apart, I might as well. And if you haven't yet checked out my full snowblower rust proofing course, I'll have that link down below in the description. Every single part before it was put back on was fully rust proofed. This thing was greasier than a Waffle House menu at 3 a.m. From there, the bucket was set, and it was time for the augers and impellers. Making sure that I put all the washers and hardware back in the correct order was a bit nerve-wracking. A couple of times I put things together and then realized I made a mistake, so then had to disassemble them and then reassemble them. And many times, because I put things back in the wrong order, the fitment wasn't quite right. I guess I was so excited to put everything back together, I was just making mistakes along the way. As I was doing all this, I greased the auger shafts heavy with red and tacky grease. This was my one shot to coat them while they're off, so I laid it on thick. Damn, that's thick! The fully repainted augers slid right on, and once they were on, I greased them again. Check out how much grease is wedged up in there. That is wild. Overkill? Yes. But I won't have to worry about them for a while. Then I locked those into place, and the overall weight of this auger and impeller assembly is mind-blowing and extremely awkward to hold in place. From there, I was ready to get the auger assembly back into the bucket. This was a challenge to reassemble without banging up the paint job that I just spent a ton of time redoing. I placed cardboard on the sides of the bucket to protect the panels as I slid in the auger assembly. This kept that new paint job in check. I had to call in my neighbor Brian, as well as the garage gal, to pull the sides of the bucket apart while I slid in the auger assembly. There we go. Almost. Pull. There we go. We're in.
You got it.
We're in.
Oh,
that's it.
Okay. Perfect.
All right.
Hey, teamwork makes the dream work.
Right. Big shout out to Brian and the garage gal for their help. Once we got it in, I was good to go from there. I popped the auger gear on the back, and this was kind of a chore because as you're sliding in that whole auger assembly, you basically have to reach over and get that gear into place so everything fits nicely. Everything fits pretty uniquely on this entire snowblower, that's for darn sure. Now that everything was where I needed it to be, I immediately greased up the auger bushings and bolted them onto each side to hold the augers in place. And I'm really blown away by the condition of these auger bushings on each side because they are in great shape considering how many years of use they have on them. They are clean and in perfect working order. This whole auger assembly is now fully locked in, and she ain't going nowhere. Like I mentioned earlier, I greased the augers once they were in place, and then I locked in the shear pins and torqued them down. I also heavily greased the linkages and controls on the back of the bucket. From there, the front of the bucket was basically done, and it was time to reassemble the wheels and transmission housing. The wheels actually had so many layers of primer and paint on them that it was difficult to insert the lug nuts. They just wouldn't thread right. I actually had to get a lot of the paint off of the threads to get them back in. If I were to do this again in the future, I would probably plug up those holes to prevent this from happening in the first place. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. Once I got the wheels back on, I began reinstalling the lower handlebars. And to get these chrome handlebars back up to their original shine, what I did is I took some Quad Zero steel wool and then sat outside on a nice fall day for about a half an hour and just buffed them. An auto body teacher recommended this to me, and it worked really well. Some of the areas were a little stubborn, but keep in mind, this snowblower is over 50 years old. Regardless, they look a lot better. Then I connected the auger controls, pulleys, and linkages. These parts all came out great too. Greased them all up and tightened them down. From there, I connected the upper chrome handlebars and then mounted the old style Ariens bracket across the middle. I went back and forth with myself on this many times. Should I paint it? Should I leave it? To repaint those fonts to get them to the way that they currently do now would be really tough. So I said, you know what? I'm just gonna leave it. No way could I get this part back to its original condition without a huge fight. Plus the patina on it looks really cool too. After that, I reinstalled the handlebar controls and linkages. Then I reunited the transmission housing with the bucket. This in itself was a glorious moment because it hadn't been together like this in many months. Pretty cool to see it looking like a snowblower again. I reinstalled the belt, which is so incredibly easy on these models. Tipped the ends up and bolted them back together. From there, it was time to remount the engine. And the engine at this time was about 80% done. I still had the carburetor cover to repaint, and I'll get more into that later. Side note, I decided to go with this Predator engine because the original Tecumseh engine that was on this unit was in really rough shape. You couldn't pull start it. I nearly busted my shoulder trying. The electric start was iffy, and the entire engine needed a lot of work. Some people love working on Tecumseh engines. I don't. They almost always give me problems. I go ahead and fix them, and they still don't work. It would probably be a very different story if I had the unit from the start. But because that Tecumseh engine needed so much work, financially it made way more sense to just pop a Predator on it. Call them Chinese engines, call them what you want. This Honda clone looks great, runs great, and I've never had an issue with a Predator engine in this garage. I dropped the engine back on the top, and now it's really starting to look like a 1971 SNO THRO again. And one of the things that I dread is rebolting that engine down. The 4 mount bolts are really hard to fit. Plus there's a lot of obstacles from the transmission in your way. To remount that took a lot longer than expected. It took longer than explaining Wi-Fi to your grandma. Jeez. We all get smart at some point. Raising this box up was something I should have done earlier. After a little while, all 4 bolts were tight and the belt was reconnected. This made sealing the deal with sliding the belly pan on underneath that much more enjoyable. Next up were the skids, and I bolted them onto the sides of the bucket. And if you're interested in learning more about how to set your skids appropriately, I'll have a video on that link down below in the description. These skids are armor skids and they last forever. I have yet to wear a set down. A lot of viewers ask about these. They take bumps better and they extend out past the bucket, so that's gonna help keep my paint job in check. I ordered these ones a while back and these were the thickest ones. Now on their website, they have varying thicknesses. I just go on and I buy the thickest ones I can find on there. They will last you forever, and I have ones that are 8 years old and still have plenty to go on them. Just measure the distance between your mount bolts and you're good to go. I'm not sponsored by them. Armor skids are a cool product, and I figured I'd mention it. From there, I reinstalled my impeller kit on each impeller blade. This only took a couple of minutes because the holes were already drilled out. I simply popped them all back into place, checked the gaps, and then tightened them all down. And I'll have a video on this impeller kit install linked down below too. Then onto the chute. This chute was sent to me by a really cool subscriber a couple of years ago. He cut the gear base off of an older Ariens chute and then welded it onto a new one. The taller chute on this definitely helps launch the snow farther. From there, I had to reassemble the chute crank. It's funny how one little thing could be such a big problem. The gear on the end had one little peg that had to go into a hole and it just wouldn't go in. Seriously, the width on that peg was like less than a 1/16 of an inch. And after some swearing and some brute force, it went back in. I remounted it, greased it up, and now she turns great. I then ensured that all my levers and controls were in working order. I remounted the belt cover, and to me, this is one of the coolest parts on this entire unit. Not many snowblowers out there have a metal belt cover, and I can't think of a brand new model that has one currently. It was super rusty before, and after sandblasting, it turned out great. The Arctic white on it looks really cool. The only issue was that the Predator engine and this cover don't exactly line up perfectly, but they do fit together. Eventually it went into place with some more swearing and brute force. And from there, one of my favorite parts of this whole project was all the brand new stickers. I found this cool website called clickitandstickit.com, and they do vintage reproduction stickers. They had all the replica stickers that I was looking for, except for one, the model number sticker, which I'll come up with something for that. What wasn't cool was that all these stickers cost me over 60 bucks. Little pricey. This little sticker right here on the wheel was 20 bucks. It's about 1.25 inches wide. And I'm pretty sure they were holding a gun to my head at checkout for that one. But it was a great way to put the cherry on the top of this whole snowblower sundae, if you know what I mean. These retro stickers look just like the old ones, and they make the whole unit pop. Now, one of the most frustrating parts of this entire project was painting the carburetor cover. Here's how it went down. I took the carburetor cover and a scuffing pad to get the sheen off of it. The entire thing's made of plastic, so I had to get that shine off. I then hit it with a coat of plastic primer and then hit it with 3 coats of Arctic white spray paint. Once that was dry, after about 24 hours, I decided to hit it with a layer of clear coat. I put the clear coat on, but apparently 24 hours for the paint to dry wasn't enough time. After spraying the clear coat on it, I went inside to check the laundry, came back out 5 minutes later to find this. The entire carburetor cover that I just painted was covered in wrinkles. It was a wrinkled mess. All that hard work basically went down the toilet because this whole thing looked like garbage. I tried dunking the cover in hot water and then tried scraping some of it off, but that proved to be useless. So what I decided to do was go ahead and buy a brand new carburetor cover off eBay. It cost me about 30 bucks, and then after a week later it came in. I then went ahead and repeated the process of scuffing it down to get the sheen off of it, and then I gave it a really light coat of plastic primer, and then hit it with multiple thin coats of the Arctic white. From there, I just left it because I didn't want any clear coat to ruin the new coat of paint that I just put on this new carburetor cover that I just bought. After painting the new one, I took it inside the house and let it dry indoors for about 3 full days. Forget about the clear coat, I wasn't chancing it. And if I have to repaint this at any point, I can easily just hit it with a quick shot of spray paint. Perhaps the previous coats on the previous carburetor cover didn't have enough drying time. Perhaps the paint and the clear coat didn't bond well with each other. I don't know the full story. I'm not a paint specialist. I only know what I know, and I know that that didn't work. The new carburetor cover with the Arctic white has enough shine, and it matches perfectly with the rest of the engine. The orange gas cap didn't give me any issues. Once the carburetor cover was dry, I remounted my hour meter, and then I tucked the cord away through and underneath the cover so that way it has a nice clean finish to it. I also managed to save the carburetor cover stickers before I repainted it. I simply used some double-sided tape and reattached them. Mounting that carburetor cover on was another cool moment because this snowblower was officially done. Mission accomplished. I bought this snowblower for $100 a few years back. And since then, I put a new engine on it, X-Track tires, an impeller kit, and then went ahead and did this entire restoration. So all in all, I'm into this snowblower for a little over 800 bucks. Given the fact that the brand new Ariens Deluxe 24 is around $1,500, this full 1971 Ariens Snow Throw restoration was about half the cost of a new one. Huge shout out to Pro Parts Direct for sending me the paint for this project. Thank you very much. The paint was a direct match, and that saved me a lot of money in itself, so I am again very grateful to Pro Parts Direct. I'm on a few snowblower groups on Facebook, and there are a few out there that have done these kinds of restorations, and they all did amazing work. And it's really cool to have one here in the garage just like those. I painted this snowblower the way I wanted it to look, and from start to finish, this entire restoration took me nearly 60 hours to complete. I went through an absurd number of latex gloves on this entire project, probably over 2 boxes. I love how it turned out. And as I mentioned earlier, this is my backup snowblower. This thing is just so heavy duty, I love it. There's nothing else like this, made like this today. This 1971 Ariens Snow Throw, without a doubt, earned its spot in this garage, and it ain't going nowhere. For more cool garage gear content, click or tap the screen right here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the garage.